GDP will be closely watched. A common definition of recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP growth, or at least that's something that's been true in past recessions. When we've seen that, there has usually been a recession. And many economists expect second quarter GDP to be negative. First quarter GDP was negative.
So I think there's also a greater risk of stagflation and this episode being with us for some number of years than the market is currently discounting.
Has inflation peaked?
I think probably.
The crisis, and I think you'll see it change sooner than quicker than more rapidly than it will take than most people think. Every other aspect of the economy is racing ahead. It's doing incredibly well. We've never had this kind of growth in 60 years. But inflation is affecting people's lives. But if you take a look at it, if and when, God willing, we get the Build Back Better proposal,
there's a very high likelihood of recession. When we've been in this kind of situation before, recession has essentially always followed. When inflation has been high and unemployment has been low, soft landings represent a kind of triumph of hope over experience. I think we're very unlikely to see one.
Oh my goodness. Next week's a very big week for the economy. So I read the CEA blog. Is the White House trying to change the common definition of a recession because next Thursday the GDP numbers coming out are going to show that we've been in a recession?
So let me say this, the strength of our labor market along with the other economic factors is what we generally see in a recession, or even what is not what we generally see in a recession or even a pre-recession, because we're seeing the strength of the economy and the labor market. So that's really important.
The job for the 3 months trend, the growth of job growth in the U.S. is shrinking, is decreasing, and 7.5 million people, a growing number, are multi-jobs, meaning they have to work more than one job to afford a living. So is jobs really a good indicator there?
Oh, look, here's what I would say. We've always talked about the strength of our economy. We've always talked about how historic it's been, and we've always talked is what we see as strength of the economy. Again, we're going to transition into a more stable and steady growth, and so we're going.
So when the administration came out and said that racial equity, climate change, environmental justice, and enhancing union opportunities were going to be the driving factors, I had strong concerns, because those are things that y'all are just deciding are priorities. They're not things that are actually in the law. And so then I said, okay, well, we'll wait and see how the grants are actually allocated and decide if this is a problem or not. Mr. Secretary, I remind you, I represent South Louisiana. We have one of the most at-risk states for sea rise. We have one of the highest African-American populations in the nation. And so I think if you go through and look at your criteria, we should be number 1, 2, and 3, really up there at the top. Yet when you allocated funds under the infra program, 15% went to the state of California. You had about $555 million went to blue states, only $350 million went to red states. Under the RAISE program, $162 million went to bike and pedestrian paths. So I want to ask you a question. If you look at TomTom, the navigation company's assessment of congestion, most congested areas in America, they said that New York was number 1. They said that Los Angeles was number 2. They said that Miami was number 3. Do you have any idea what number 4 was or is?
I don't.
So it would be the metropolis of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which puts it ahead of Chicago and San Francisco and a number of other significantly larger places. 62 hours a year, time lost just sitting in traffic. If you look at the 2 grant programs, $1 billion each, you would think that with us being the state that should be performing top under your criteria, top under the criteria that I wrote because I'm incredibly biased, yet we got 1 grant, and this is what it was. $18.5 million to improve fare collection for New Orleans Transit. It's kind of hard to understand, really hard to reconcile. I tried to get him to find a better snapshot on Google Map traffic, but it's normally dark red. This is the bridge. It's the only place in America where the interstate funnels down to a single lane. And it's not because we were innovative and came up with a great idea that nobody else could think of. It was idiotic, and proof is that we have 62 hours we sit around and waste in traffic. And here's the last slide. Is just a picture here showing the bridge that looks like a parking lot because people are just sitting there. This is I-10 connecting California to Florida. So I want to ask, how are you prioritizing, and how can projects like this not get funded when you're putting money toward bike trails, putting money toward, transit systems got $263 million under one of the programs, over a quarter of the funds, whenever we gave transit tens of billions of dollars. The highways didn't get anything. So I guess I'm just trying to understand, what are we doing, and why aren't we putting money toward true national priorities that will relieve congestion, reduce emissions, improve time saved in traffic, and other things that I think we would share?
Well, our shared priorities, I think, are very well served by the things that we funded in the infra program and in the RAISE program. But I'll acknowledge that for every dollar we were able to give out, there were probably about 10 that applied. So we had a lot of worthy projects, many, I'm sure, from your district or your state and from all around the country, which qualified, but we were only able to work with the funding that we had. I will say, one of the things we tried to do is really make sure that these dollars in infra, for example, got around the country regardless of certainly regardless of politics. That for every project we were able to say yes to, there's several more that would be folks would be disappointed we couldn't get there.
Right.
But again, thanks to this interview.
Secretary, I'm out of time, and I appreciate you being here and answering the questions. I look forward to following up with you on this, and I would like to ask, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, if you could please provide the committee with the metrics for how you have measured those 4 criteria that I mentioned, I would appreciate it.